All right, welcome, folks. My name is Doug Cothy, and I'm a principal consultant with People Smart Group and the founder of the Organizational Health Collective. And I'm here with Terry Wager, Dr. Terry Wager. And he
Dr.
is,
Lee.
yeah.
And I'm a principal consultant for Generator Group with my partner, Christine, who is also a principal consultant for our group. And we are members and on the board, what do we call
Advisory Council.
Advisory Council
Yeah.
Council for the Organizational Health Collective. And it's good to be here today, Doug.
Yeah, great to be here too. I love it. We are kicking off this show to continue discussing things related to organizational health. And we're, as both part of the Organizational Health Collective, we love getting to discuss organizational health and introduce other people to it. And so what's the purpose of our show and why are we here? A couple of different things that we want to do. One, we love the idea of alerting businesses to what we believe is, and so many other people do, is the greatest multiplier for their businesses to get results and expose them to the community of consultants that can help them capitalize on it. We really believe this is the way to capitalize on all of your strengths to the maximum, is getting the most out of your people by building a really healthy culture. And so that's number one. And then number two, we want to expose all of the organizational health consultants and practitioners out there to the Organizational Health Collective, our community of practitioners, and where you can find a place to grow in your expertise, be encouraged, and get opportunities to partner with others. This is a great community of people who are just very giving of themselves and love to help one another. And it's amazing. We've just so enjoyed it and so enjoyed being with one another. And so this is the reason that we've started this show. And so we're thrilled you're here to join us, and we hope you get a ton out of it.
Absolutely. I'm going to take it in a little different direction and maybe even plug next week, right? Next week, we have a speaker coming in to talk to the collective. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, March 7th, we've got principal consultant from the Table Group, Al Amador. He'll be speaking to us 1 Eastern and 10 Pacific. You can go to the Organizational Health Collective site on LinkedIn to find information about that. That'll be up later today, and you can register and come join us on that. It'll be on a Zoom link, and he'll be sharing specifically for consultants in the realm of business development, and then just otherwise about building your business for consulting in the organizational health arena, and helping us out in that arena. And he's been at it for quite a while. Very successful consultant who just does amazing work for all of his clients. And so we're looking forward to getting to hear from him. And he's just a great friend of us as a collective, and someone who's really been a really influential and helpful person, and really just gives so willingly to help others. And we've been blessed by him. So yeah, thanks. Great.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I see about him is, he's a great consultant, but he's also one of the top people that I can think of in business development. And so if you're an organizational health consultant, or you're a consultant in general, and you want to learn more about what we do and how we help each other, or you want to learn more about business development, come check it out on March 7th, because it's going to be a good talk. And finding the link is pretty easy. Either reach out to Doug Cothy or myself, and we will direct you. But you can also find it on the LinkedIn group. Is it group, or is it in on your page on LinkedIn?
Yep. There's a LinkedIn group as well for Organizational Health Collective. So you can go there and find it, or you can just reach out to me through my LinkedIn or through YouTube, which we're on as well. So either of those, that'd be great. So
awesome.
Yep. Or you see up top on here, we've got community.organizationalhealthcollective.com. That's our actually link to the community itself. So for anyone that wants to join with us and be a part of it, so come check us out there as well. So
what are we talking about today, Doug?
Great question. I think we've got a great topic for today. But before we jump in our topic, I thought it'd be fun for us, and as we talked about this, was just that question of what led you to working in organizational health. So that'd be a fun topic to kick off with, Terry. And,
okay. Well, I'll start then. And
all right.
There might be a little bit of a confession here too. I am this is not the confession, but I'm trained as a clinical psychologist. So I was always working with people on personal vulnerability and development of your person and being able to have, stronger ability to get into healthy conflict and talk about yourself and move through issues. And so that's
Yeah.
nothing new to me, but I started working with businesses probably about 2014 in my private practice. And then I started moving little by little into working with businesses only. And as a result, I started realizing that I really liked doing that more. And so I just kind of dropped all clinical and started moving organizational back then. And then I had a client a number of years back, probably 2020, right around the Table Group's Kappa Pro coming out. And one of my clients was talking to me about what I was talking to him about with becoming more vulnerable and getting into the conflict. And he's like, "Oh, you must have read Five Dysfunctions of a Team." And I was like, "Oh, yeah. And here's the I never heard of the book before. And I never heard anything about organizational health as a title of something. I knew organizational development and I knew business development.
Yeah.
And I knew personal development, but I didn't know this idea of organizational health. And so I was like, yeah, of course. It makes total sense what you're talking about with Five Dysfunctions as a Team. That's really basically the model that I work from. And then I went home and I bought the book and I was like, holy crap, this guy has a simple model for what I've been doing all of the time that I've been working with businesses. And so I got to his book, and I think I read all of his books in probably about 3-week period. And really, I'm one of those people that takes in information quite fast. But it really resonated with me, this idea of organizational health. And the idea of organizational health is not about wellness. It's not about physical fitness or anything like that. It's really about how to communicate better to keep the organizational healthy like you would a human being healthy. And so what do we want to do with that? And that's how I got into it is accidentally I had a client come to me and go, "Hey, sounds like what you're doing is this." And I was like, "It does."
Yeah. Hey, thanks for pointing me to the book that shows me what I've been doing all this time.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's neat.
Exactly. So how did you get into it?
Well, wow, that's a great question. Thanks for asking, Terry. Well, it's interesting because, again, like you, I'm not psychology background, but for me, my background was actually being a pastor. So I was working on people's health from a different angle, spiritual background, and helping people get healthy and working both on an organizational level, because I was working on a church level as a pastor of a church, but then also on an individual level and helping people on that level. And so I got introduced to Patrick Lencioni's writing probably, I got to say, 2012, 2013, something in there. And actually started using a lot of the materials with the church that I was working with. So I'd gotten introduced to his book, The Advantage. And then the most important one I got introduced to initially for that was his work on the meaning. And so I brought that one in because the church I was a part of then had one meeting that the leaders of the church were meeting when I first got there. And it started, about 6-ish and ended after midnight. And didn't get a lot done. And they were pretty angry at each other when they got finished. And so when I got there, it was like, okay, this can't go on, guys. We got to figure out something here. And reading through Patrick's book, Death by Meeting, I was thinking, yeah, death by meeting. Yes, this is that meeting. Everyone's dying in this meeting, and they're dying by this meeting. And so going through that book really helped solidify just, yes, this is what we need. And so I said to him, hey, guys, we're going to have more meetings. And of course, then they wanted to kill me. And it was going to be my death because of that meeting. But I was like, no, listen, trust me, this is going to work, guys. And so we moved to having one meeting that was our strategic, which that meeting became. And then
Yep.
we moving off of that, we then begin to have, hey, we're going to have another meeting in the month. We're going to have once a month, maybe twice if we need it, but we're going to have really where we get into those other issues that we're constantly getting into that. The first one was a tactical, where we're going to have the strategic meeting. That one became the tactical.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're going to have the strategic issues that we're going to pull out of that meeting. We're not going to discuss everything under the sun in that one meeting. And we move the strategic to a Saturday morning. And so we do 1 or 2 issues that Saturday morning, and it worked great. We had about an hour, 2 hours to discuss 1 or 2 issues and really dive in them deep. And then we started having a quarterly retreat for the leaders, and that went great. And so we started breaking it down into that, and that one monthly meeting now was down to about an hour and a half. And so the wives of those guys loved it. Those guys loved it. The only complaint was the one guy who loved to make a pot of coffee for the meeting. He was never finishing it. That was his main complaint. He couldn't finish the pot of coffee in the time we had the meeting anymore. So that was the only complaint we had at that point. So that was the intro for me. And we started using a lot of different things from the Advantage as I led the church. And so for me, it was an application of organizational health within a church that led me to love so much of what I was learning about organizational health. And then once I left that church, I moved down to Houston, where I live now, and was in the midst of figuring out, what do I do next? I didn't have a next step church-wise because I'd moved here to take care of family. And in the midst of that, thinking through, hey, I'd love to help. I'd begun to help other churches and do some nonprofit work that way already previously. And so I was like, hey, I'd love to really do this, not only with churches, but with businesses as well. So I started to get my feet wet in that and absolutely loved it. And it was just, hey, this is fun. I love it. I'd do this for free if I didn't have teenagers to feed.
Right.
But I do. I have
Right.
teenagers to feed. So I started to have to charge money for it.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, hey, this is awesome.
It's interesting that you were talking about working with churches and nonprofits, because one of the things that I found is like, and I'm on a board of a nonprofit for community togetherness and a safe place for kids to grow and develop through skateboards. It's called the Push Movement, and it's an amazing thing run by a guy named Brett Etchley. But very, very cool thing. But the thing I've noticed about all the different nonprofits, and especially as people start creating these nonprofits, is they don't really want to impose on the people who are volunteering. And so they have this problem where they need things done. They want things done a certain way, but then they don't want to impose. And so it starts some of the problems that you start seeing in the meetings. And then it's hard to actually get people to buy in, because they're not running the meetings quite right, and they're not separating out issues, and they're not really looking at what we're trying to accomplish right now. And it turns into either boring meetings or chaotic meetings and that type of thing. But it really is because people think about the nonprofit as, oh, we don't want to impose on these volunteers. What was your experience with that?
You know, it is interesting because, there's that sense of which with volunteers and or just even in a church setting too, right? You get the we want to be nice mentality where it's like, oh, I don't want to push. I don't want to push hard on or push in on people, and having to really think through, okay, well, what's most loving, right? What's the loving thing for us to do to do the right thing? But I've seen that a lot where it's like, oh yeah, we don't want to push. We don't want to impose. We don't want to. So that's the hard part, is how do we do what's best for the organization and push toward how do we accomplish, if we really have a worthwhile and meaningful purpose and goal, we want to do the best we can to actually accomplish that.
Absolutely. It kind of moves into our real topic for today, which is the idea of how do you define the team dynamics. Isn't that?
Yeah. Yep.
What was that?
And so company or nonprofit there. How should a company define their team dynamic? And a little background on that. This came out, I was just at a networking event, and a friend of mine who's a recruiter asked me the question. I guess he had just read an article. I know there's one from Harvard Business Review that was from a few years ago, but he had just read one that said, hey, a lot of these companies are defining their team dynamic by family, which again, here's a perfect example of what a lot of organizations that are nonprofits or churches think about. Hey, we're all family, right? So, and the idea that that's kind of can get toxic. And so how do we define our team dynamic in a way that's helpful and healthy? And he was asking me that question. He's like, so how do you see that? That question of should we define it as a family? The article, he said, he's like, it suggested maybe a sports team, maybe something else. So what would you do with that? So what do you think, Terry? How do you do that?
That's a really good question. And we actually have worked with a number of companies that want to define people as family. And the first thing I think about it is no matter how you're defining your team with that idea is what's happening is you're kind of putting a label on it instead of really getting to what you're looking for behaviorally. And we're a sports team, right? And you said that, and this is how a sports team should act. And we're a family. This is how a family should act. And I mean, I came from a great family that had, I have 5 siblings and 2 parents, and all of us were type A kind of thing. And so you got that kind of family. There's other families that have people that move away and never talk to you again. Dysfunction abounds in families. Right. And so are we talking about a dysfunctional family? Well, we got a book for that called 5 Dysfunctions of a Family. Of a team. Right. And so, right. And so,
it's too, right.
I really think about the label of family versus label of sports team or even, tribe was brought up at one point. And this is our tribe. Well, every one of those is a label to kind of describe an overall view of it, which I would say is sociological. And so this is what it looks like. But when we get down to it, how does it operate? And how do people communicate? And how do people actually make decisions? And how do people really get into the dysfunction? Because here's the thing, and you'll probably agree with this because we're very similar in how we look at teamwork and things like that. But if you have more than one person on a team, you're going to have dysfunction starting to come out. And we got to have a communication strategy for that dysfunction so that the dysfunction doesn't rule the day.
Right. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love how you identify there as like who's family, right? What family? And even if you go sports team, what's sports team, right? Then or what tribe, right? I mean, a tribe of headhunters or a tribe that's peaceful. I mean, hello, who are we defining this by?
Are they working together? Somebody gunning for a promotion in the headhunting tribe?
Right.
And what's that going to look
how
like?
does tribe work?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I really do think when we're looking at the team and the label, we had we had a group that we were working with a quick serve restaurant group, and they had a number of restaurants. And they described them as family. And so when we started working with them and really looking at some of the things that were going on, they were scared to death that their employees were going to quit because they didn't have coverage, and they didn't have a real good hiring system, and they didn't have a real good onboarding system, which, by the way, is not a failure of them alone. It's like 50% of the quick serve restaurants out there have trouble with hiring, trouble with onboarding and keeping people. But they were calling these people their family. And just so happens that they are afraid to hurt them. And so I don't want to hurt my family members. They're their family. We gotta work with them. And as they were thinking, the owners were thinking, we got to work with those people and try to make them happy. Pay attention to how I'm saying this. Try to make them happy. What was happening was the workers were taking advantage of the family kind of feel of the owners, and they were using that family aspect against the owners instead of going, oh, well, we want to contribute because we care too. They were like, oh, they're treating us like we're family. Well, we're going to be spoiled kids and have tantrums when we don't get what we want. And
Right.
so it didn't work very well. And so
Yeah.
we really looked at that, and we looked at all of the behaviors that we're valuing and what kind of behaviors are we wanting in the system. And as soon as we started altering what the behavior looks like
Yep.
and how people show up at work, well, there was a minor mass exodus of anybody who wasn't interested in being accountable in the
Yeah.
family.
Yep.
And then they were able to hire some people that really were in agreement with the behavioral values they were looking at. And so that's kind of what I think about a lot is like, how are you describing how you show up?
Yeah.
And
I
when
love it.
we really look at, we start to get a better vision of what that means, whether you call them family or you call them a team or what.
Yep.
And what's your experience?
I think we've got to respect the reality that every analogy breaks down at some point, right? And I think that's the problem is we want to use examples, we want to use analogies, but if you're going to do that, you've got to realize that analogies are going to break down. And so you've got to deal with that backside where they break down and it becomes, hey, you know what? Because we say we're family doesn't mean I'm committed to you forever. There's going to be a point where you might get fired. You might get kicked out. You might,
Divorce.
There's an end to this relationship. And so I can't quite say you're family to that extent in a job. And so there's a breakdown where it's not quite like a family. It's like a family to this extent. And I think, so we have to define it saying, I'm using this imagery to the extent that it's like it to this extent. And so we've got to define how we use the imagery if we're going to use it. Otherwise, I think, like you said, I think we're a lot better off just saying, hey, these are the attributes that I think are best. So I think we want to be caring toward one another. We want to be like I love that Pat Lanchonio often talks about that love should be a definer. And of course, most people get squirmy when they hear that. But what he means by that is not, hey, we're getting all touchy-feely necessarily, but that we're out for the best of the other person. And by that, we're out then for the best of the organization as well. So if I'm out for you
Absolutely.
succeeding, you're out for me succeeding, then the organization is going to succeed because your success and my success is what's going to make everything go well. And so that by definition, if I'm seeking your best and you're seeking my best, we're going to do well. We're going to succeed. We're going to be productive. And so that by that definition, love should be a definer of our teamwork. Caring about you, having compassion and empathy of what goes on and what struggles you have so that we can get ahead and do the work we got to do well. Those are key things that I think a family would have for one another that I want to bring into the work environment.
Right.
Trust, right? I mean, we talk all the time about vulnerability-based trust. And there's a place where I don't sometimes like the teamwork side. I mean, not the teamwork, the sports team side. I think a good sports team probably has good trust in that, but it's not always as vulnerability based depending on your teammates, right? Because we're highly competitive and sometimes we might use that against one another in a sports team setting. But in a good teamwork setting, we're going to actually be able to know each other's weaknesses and help prop each other up well. And step in and say, hey, my strength complements your weakness. Let me step in here. You step in over here for my weakness. Being able to know each other at that level helps us be more productive. But in some settings of sports teams or tribes, if it's a dog eat dog type setting in that culture, I don't want you to know my weakness. So depending how I define sports team or how I define tribe or even family, my family growing up was dog eat dog. I don't want to know my weakness. That's going to get taken advantage of, and I'm going to be the bottom dog. And so how it was defined can tell you everything, and I don't want it defined by that.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that's the work of all of the leaders is to really create the model for vulnerability-based trust. And one of the things I talk about with a lot of the leaders that I'm working with is the idea of you're modeling what you're looking for, and then you're coaching to the model all the time. Yeah. And the problem that I see so many people have is they either forget to model or they forget to coach to it, or both. Which if they're not doing either, that's a real problem. But unfortunately, so often we get so bogged down by what we think we need to do in the smart world, which, making more money or making sure the processes are working or whatever it might be. They're so focused on trying to make the thing work that they forget to actually create the environment with modeling the behavior they're looking for by being more vulnerable, by being more clear on what they're looking for expectation wise, the leadership team, for people to show up. And I think that, even on a sports team, when you start to see egos abound instead of teamwork, one, you'll recognize it in the score. Two, you start to also really see it in how they're not working together, which is weird because I live in Portland and I've watched the Trailblazers for a number of years, and they always talk about how unselfish they are, but then they're not winning games also. And so it's like, are they unselfish or are they working sort of as a unit? Are they working to the best of their ability as a unit? And I mean, I'm not in the inner workings of how the team is really connecting with each other, but there's something wrong when they continue to work at that and then be unselfish, but they're not really attacking the problem, which is losing. And I mean, for me, there's a real acid test there on the team if it's really functioning, especially in sports. If they're losing all of the time and they're not actually able to come back, there's a problem. 50% is good. 50%, okay, you're doing pretty good. If you're under 50%, you have a problem in your teamwork and your communication, and you're not talking about it. And then what you hear is all these kinds of things. Well, we're really working on this, and I'm also working with another business that has two leadership styles within one leadership structure, and both of them are waiting for the other to fail.
Wow.
And it's like, this is not a recipe for moving forward. This is not well, it might be a dysfunctional family, bringing it back there, but the problem is we're all individuals trying to be teammates, and then we're not really discussing what the family might look like or what the team might look like or what the tribe is looking like, and we don't get clarity around what we want it to look like. And there's an old saying that individuals win games, but teams win championships. And when we really start to look at that, I think the biggest thing that we got to focus on is that the team that's winning championships isn't because we called them a team, and it isn't because we called them a family, and it isn't because we called them a tribe or anything like that. It's because they are communicating at a level that everybody knows what's supposed to be happening and what's going on with everybody, and they know where they're supposed to be. They know their roles, they know their priorities, and they're executing at a champion level.
And I think there's something that brings all that together as well. And I think you alluded to it even last week when we were talking, is they also have something that transcends them as a team, a higher purpose, right?
Yes.
And so that team that comes together as a team because they have a higher movement, a higher purpose, that they're shooting for the championship. And that drive of collective results is what pulls them along and pulls them together, because they have something that they're all driven toward, that they all want. And so the fact that they all want the same thing merges them together as a team.
Yeah, and I think that it's not just the championship, but what the championship means to them. And so my guess is that those championship teams have conversations around what the championship means to them. And it doesn't mean we get a trophy, and it doesn't mean we get a bunch of money or a contract that's moved on, but what is it internally that it means to you that you have performed at that level and achieved that that goal. And then along with that, what does it mean to you to be able to actually help the other people do that?
Right.
Because the more that we can really focus on, hey, I want to win this championship because it is something that, you know, is really important to me because, you know, whatever because my dad showed me how to play when I was a kid, and I just remember the feeling he had when I outperformed or whatever. And so I'm doing this for him, or I'm doing this for the kids at the hospital or whatever that really get excited about it. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not a championship basketball player or football player, so I really don't care why they win. And in fact, honestly, I don't care if they win. I'm very disconnected to that. So I would probably not necessarily be the one to rally people in that situation. But here's another thing, me saying that. If I had a team come to me and said, we really want to win, and they were able to give me a good, real why we exist kind of reason, I could be enrolled in that very well and very easy. Because one of the things that's interesting about myself is I can get enrolled, and this might be a bad thing, but I can get enrolled in somebody else's vision very easily and become very mission oriented around helping them, because one of the things that drives me more than anything is helping other people create their vision and accomplish their vision. And so my vision is to help other people with their vision. But when they can say what their vision is and why they're doing this, why it's important, and they enroll everybody else, that's where we're going to see them become a championship team.
Yeah, as you were sharing about that, I thought of a great example is, and it's great when it comes around and the vision and the mission unites, right? Everyone starts to have it and it coalesces around, hey, we're all focused on this for the same reason and the same heart. And I was thinking of the last World Cup when the entire Argentina team, their entire focus was, we want to get Lionel Messi a win in the World Cup before he is done and retired and can't play again. Here he is, the greatest player in the world, won the Ballon d'Or how many times, and yet never has won a World Cup. And they're like, we got to get him across the finish line. And how many times it looked like they failed miserably. They went behind in the semifinal after being or tied after being up, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden you see their whole team rally. In the final, even it looked like they were going to squander it again, and their whole team rallies. And just the way the whole team would rise and come together, and the way that whole team just played was just amazing, because they were all unified in one purpose. They wanted to get him across that finish line.
And now that you say that, it just reminded me of Rob McElhenney's and Ryan Reynolds' team Wrexham, and the story of Wrexham. And if you haven't seen it, go to Hulu and watch Welcome to Wrexham. It's an amazing story that happens to also be true, that these two guys found each other. Rob McElhenney actually found Ryan and asked him if he wanted to buy this football team, and they went to work helping them to get promoted. That team, they went and bought the team, and their whole focus was to get them promoted into a higher league. And I don't want to ruin it, but it is exactly what we're talking about. And the trials and tribulations, but everybody getting on board and everybody starting to really rally around why they're doing this. It becomes a juggernaut rather than just something that we hope might happen. And it really does matter when we start really going, okay, why do we exist? And then how are we actually going to work together? And whether we call ourselves a family, whether we call ourselves a team, whether we call ourselves a tribe, really doesn't matter. It really matters that we're working together and have some kind of accountable expectation that we can all work towards to become the champions that we all can be.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so it seems like summing up is just really, we got to drill down on the principles. We got to drill down on where are we headed, and getting the principles of who are we as a team, more than we got to worry about what is our example. Wow, great stuff. Thanks, Terry. Hey, thanks for joining us, guys. We're thrilled. We will see you back here next week. We're so thrilled to have you. We'll see you next week.